Finding the lens to change perspective.
Huh? Oh, hi. Y'all scenario. Imagine waking up on a Saturday morning, 7 again, after a night, countless hours of meditation. Your body wakes up as refreshed as you slept. Race to the kitchen, going all personal hygiene to reach the mother of all smells. Catch a whiff of bacon, waffles, a bit of nutmeg, cinnamon, syrup. And as your mother sets down your plate of breakfast, no time, I'm putting on your favorite Saturday morning cartoon, Static Shock. For me, Static Shock was my favorite for its iconic tagline, I put a shock to your system. But because of the fact that it was one of the first times that I saw someone who looked like me represented in that way. Witnessing a character on television who not only looked like me, but was kicking butt at the same time, gave me a sense of pride in my own abilities. Seeing myself represented on television made me feel like I had the strength of 100 men. Now, with children around 2 to 5 years old watching around 22 hours of television each week, according to the Huffington Post, perspectives on representation are everywhere for children. Just like my situation, these perspectives can have an effect on the children viewing these examples of representation from their respective communities. And don't just take my word for it. A study done by the assistant professor of communications at Indiana University found that when both white and black children watched television for an extended period of time and were prompted with questions to gauge how their self-esteem was affected by the television watching, it was found that black children left with a disproportionately lower self-esteem than the white ones. When the study was extended to women, the self-esteem measurements yielded were around the same. With that in mind, black people would have to fit into a caricature that doesn't define them as people. This leads them to try and fit into a narrative that isn't applicable to people seen in real life. So, if the black child sees themselves represented as a criminal, they're more likely to act in accordance with that representation. For me, self-expression through visual art helped me to combat the negative ways in which people who had the same face as me were being portrayed. It was a vehicle for education on myself and the culture in which I was raised, thereby giving me a unique perspective on the facets of my blackness. Of course, when I first delved into the art world, I wasn't looking for it to spite some imagined evil corporation utilizing negative stereotypes of people who look like me for their own personal gain. I was simply visually capturing the images of my family members, inadvertently taking the narratives of people that look like me into my own hands. Now that I'm older, I've tried to change society's perception of people of color by showcasing them in states of pride, as if to tell the viewer that my subjects choose not to be ashamed of their own existence. I try to utilize my art to give to viewers the inclination that black people aren't a monolith, and that we all have different ideas and backgrounds in which make us people. So what do you see in this piece? Through art, black people are given the freedom to take control of the mediums in which negative stereotypes about them are being transmitted, and in turn creating a society more accepting and respectful of minority spaces within American society. I believe today, more than ever before, we are on the brink of an artistic renaissance in which people of color are employing principles such as this one to improve the society we live in. Taking, for example, the British-Nigerian artist Yinka Shonibari's rendition of The Swing by French artist Jean-Michel Frénard. Frénard painted during a period art historians call the Rococo, in which lives of aristocratic, pleasure-seeking socialites were the norms in terms of theme. This was also during the late 1700s, which means people of color were almost non-existent in terms of primary subjects. What's fascinating about Shonibari's rendition is that he puts the pleasure-seeking narrative in terms of the minority perspective, giving new life to the piece as a whole. Another example are the works of Kehinde Wiley. Wiley is most notable for his portrait of President Barack Obama, but what evokes even more interest is the subject matter of his work. Wiley takes normal black citizens and puts them into positions of regality and royalty, pushing the barriers between the mundane and the upper crust, all through minority perspectives. Finally, the most notable example I could possibly give is Ryan Coogler's Black Panther. In it, the audience is transported to the technological utopia of Wakanda, a fictional country within the continent of Africa. I mentioned this as my final example of representation through visual media because the effect that it has brought within our society is palpable. Families of all kinds came in droves to see the movie, and with it becoming the highest grossing superhero movie of all time, estimated to make around $1 billion, the appeal of the movie is undeniable. But what's notable is how the movie is indicative of the cultural moment that we are currently experiencing. A moment where a piece of our cultural history, to be remembered years after its conception, was created by a full black cast. Black Panther's release and subsequent success meant for me that my nation was finally legitimizing a platform on which people who look like me could tell their narratives from their own perspective, giving them a connection to the minorities of the future. These trailblazers have made a way for people of color to have higher expectations for themselves, thereby becoming better equipped to reach heights that were unimaginable in years past. When looking into all of these pioneers in black representation, I found myself emboldened in my artistic endeavors. It was like my purpose in art was given new life. I found at the barest of minimums, the point of my art is to reach a connection to my viewers when I don't have the words to articulate them. As Dutch philosopher Baruch Spinoza once said, not to lament, not to laugh, not to curse, but to understand. This is a call to action for more people of color to create their own stories from their own perspectives. And today we're seeing successful executions of this with stories such as Crazy Rich Asians and Coco. Having more and more people of color inspired to create helps our country to have a better understanding of each other. Finally, in times where I feel misunderstanding will take over, I remember myself with the works constantly created every day. Being alive for the conception of both T'Challa of Wakanda and Miles Morales of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse makes me hopeful for the time in which we can currently reside, where absolute, true human understanding and unity feels like it's just over the horizon. Thank you.